Hello, people from the Secrets of Men channel. My name is Michael, and I'm 35 years old. Today, I'm going to tell you about the day I got involved with my brother-in-law when he spent a few days at my and my wife's house. So subscribe to the channel and stay until the end so you don't miss any details. Life hasn't been exactly as I imagined when I said yes to Emily, my wife of 32 years. We live in Denver, Colorado, in a house that once overflowed with love and laughter, but has now become a stage for silent arguments and disappointed looks. The glow that used to illuminate our relationship has faded, and instead of partners, we are two strangers occupying the same space. Our 6-year-old son, Lucas, is the light of our lives, but even the joy he brings can't fill the void between us. Recently, the atmosphere became heavy, and I knew something needed to change. Fights over unpaid bills and the challenges of Lucas's education were pushing us further apart. What should have been a partnership seemed like a constant struggle. One afternoon, as I watched the rain fall through the living room window, Emily walked in with a twinkle in her eye. The soft afternoon light illuminated her face, but there was a worry that she tried to hide. "Michael, you won't believe it," she said, drawing in a deep breath. "Jake is staying here for 2 weeks. He's got a job in the area and needs a place to stay." Jake, my brother-in-law, has always been close to me, but the idea of having him live with us didn't appeal to me. He was always the favorite, the younger brother who always got things more easily, which made me even more jealous. What should have been a gesture of solidarity began to look like a threat to my marriage. "Oh yeah," I replied, trying to hide my displeasure. "And this is good for him? Are you sure it's going to be comfortable for us?" Emily looked excited, her smile lighting up the room. "He's a great person, Michael. It'll be good to have him around. We always have fun together, and he can help with a few things around the house." My stomach churned when I heard the enthusiasm in her voice. As she spoke, I felt a mixture of jealousy and insecurity growing inside me. Jake had always been cool and charismatic, a contrast I couldn't ignore. The idea of having my brother-in-law at home for 2 weeks seemed like an invitation to disaster. Over the next few days, Emily became even more enthusiastic about Jake's visit. She spent hours planning what to cook and how to organize the house to welcome him. I tried not to show my concern, but with each passing day, the tension between us grew. Instead of sitting down and discussing how we could fix our marriage, Emily seemed more willing to focus on her brother. When Jake finally arrived, it was as if a storm had blown into our house. He was everything I had feared: tall, handsome, and charismatic. As soon as he walked in, he greeted Emily with a warm hug and a smile that made her face glow. I stood there, watching as her brother did what I could no longer do: make her smile. "Hummy." "Hi, Mike," said Jake, holding out his hand. "Good to see you again, brother." "You too, Jake," I replied, forcing a smile as my heart squeezed. As we talked, the connection between Emily and Jake was palpable. They laughed together as if I wasn't there. I tried to join in, but the feeling of being an intruder intensified. The jokes they exchanged made me feel excluded, as if I were watching two best friends instead of a pair of siblings. That evening, as we ate dinner, the conversation flowed naturally. Jake told funny stories from work, and Emily laughed, her eyes sparkling with joy. The food was delicious, but a feeling of bitterness settled in my chest. With every laugh she let out, I felt a piece of me break off. It was as if the connection we used to have was vanishing before my eyes. "Hi, Mike," said Jake, holding out his hand. "Good to see you again, brother." "You too, Jake," I replied, forcing a smile as my heart squeezed. As we talked, the connection between Emily and Jake was palpable. They laughed together as if I wasn't there. I tried to join in, but the feeling of being an intruder intensified. The jokes they exchanged made me feel excluded, as if I were watching two best friends instead of a pair of siblings. That evening, as we ate dinner, the conversation flowed naturally. Jake told funny stories from work, and Emily laughed, her eyes sparkling with joy. The food was delicious, but a feeling of bitterness settled in my chest. With every laugh she let out, I felt a piece of me break off. It was as if the connection we used to have was vanishing before my eyes. "You should see what happened at the last team meeting," Jake said, laughing. "I nearly spilled my coffee on my boss." Emily let out a laugh and my heart squeezed. What had happened to both of us? To our smiles and laughter? As we ate dinner, Jake looked at me and asked, "What about you, Mike?" What have you been up to lately? Still working on that boring project? I hesitated, not knowing how to respond. Ah, you know how it is. Just work, trying to keep the house in order. Emily noticed my bitter tone and changed the subject, but the impact of the question still hung in the air. The night ended, and when everyone went to their rooms, I lay awake, reflecting on the situation. My heart was torn between my love for my wife and the growing envy I felt for her brother. Over the next few days, the dynamics in the house became even more complicated. Jake settled in comfortably, and Emily was always excited to spend time with him. They went to the store together, went shopping, and even had fun cooking. I felt more and more removed, like a spectator in their story. One evening, while I was trying to relax on the sofa, Jake came into the living room. He had just got out of the shower, his wet hair falling over his forehead. The smell of his shampoo permeated the room, and I wondered if Emily had noticed how he looked more attractive than ever. "What's up, Mike?" he said, throwing himself down on the sofa next to me. "What do you say we watch a movie?" I looked at him, surprised. "Sure, why not? What do you want to watch?" "How about something action-packed?" he suggested, his smile contagious. As the movie started, his proximity made me uneasy. I couldn't help feeling that the connection between us was changing. Looking at Jake's face, I realized that there was a tension, an expectation in the air that I couldn't understand. The movie began to play in the background as our gazes met. After a few scenes, I said, trying to break the ice, "Do you still play soccer, Jake?" "Of course, I played last weekend. You should come one day," he replied, his enthusiasm contagious. "It would be nice to have some time to ourselves." I felt a twinge of discomfort, but also curiosity. "Yeah, maybe I should." As the film continued, I realized that I was feeling more attracted to Jake than I should have been. It was a disturbing thought, and I tried to push it away. The tension in the room became unbearable, and I stood up, saying I needed a glass of water. As I walked away, I heard Jake mutter, "He doesn't know what he's missing." These words echoed in my mind, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of insecurity. What exactly did Jake mean by that? Over the next few days, the dynamic between us continued to evolve. Jake started calling me to activities that had previously been exclusive to Emily and me. One day, while we were washing the car, the conversation flowed naturally. "You know, Mike, I've always admired you. You've always been a nice guy," said Jake sincerely. "You're a great father and a good husband." I laughed, a little surprised. "Thanks, Jake. That means a lot coming from you." From that moment on, the tension I'd been feeling began to turn into something different. There was a growing connection between us, and I didn't know how to handle it. Every accidental touch, every shared glance seemed to carry a hidden meaning. One evening, after a stressful day, I decided I needed to get something off my chest. Emily was busy with her homework, and Jake was watching a game on the sofa. I sat down next to him and, on an impulse, started talking. "I don't know, man. I feel like Emily and I are losing our connection. The routine, the fights. It's all so tiring." Jake looked at me, his expression becoming more serious. "Have you thought about talking to her about it? Sometimes communication is everything." "I've tried, but we don't seem to be on the same page." "I don't know how to get back to how we were before," I said, my voice breaking. "I understand. It's difficult." Jake replied, his gaze fixed on me. "But you shouldn't give up so easily. You still love her, don't you?" The question hit me like a punch in the gut. Did I really still love her? In the midst of my confusion, I realized that the love I felt was transforming. It was more complex than I'd like to admit. As we talked, the tension in the air began to change again. Jake moved a little closer, his eyes fixed on mine. The silence between us became heavy, and part of me wanted to break it, but the other part was scared of what it might mean. I started to say, but I couldn't find the words. Jake seemed to understand my dilemma. "Sometimes you have to take a risk, Mike." I didn't know how to respond. The intensity of the situation left me confused. What did he mean by risk? That night, I couldn't sleep. The idea that something was changing between the two of us kept me awake, and the growing tension made me more anxious. There was a fine line between love and betrayal, and I wondered if I was about to cross it. Over the next few days, the tension between Jake and me continued to grow. As the interactions between us became more emotionally charged, I realized that I was increasingly divided. At night, Emily was so focused on Jake that I felt invisible. The idea that my brother-in-law might be becoming a more significant presence in my wife's life made me uneasy. One afternoon while Jake and I were playing video games, the atmosphere in the living room seemed electric. The healthy competition quickly turned into something more. Jake was so close that I could feel his warmth, and for a moment, the tension became palpable. "You're a loser, Mike," he teased, winking at me, and I couldn't help but laugh. "Says the guy who can't win a match," I replied, trying to hide the growing feeling of adrenaline. The game continued, but the chemistry between us was becoming more and more intense. With every glance we exchanged, the tension seemed to increase, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Part of me wanted to enjoy the connection, while another part tried to resist. In a moment of carelessness, our gazes met, and the energy between us became almost unbearable. I couldn't look away, and neither could Jake. An involuntary smile formed on our faces, and I wondered if he also felt what I was feeling. It was then that I heard Emily calling. She entered the room with a smile, and the connection that had formed between us quickly dissipated. "If you're enjoying this men's story, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel." "What are you two doing?" she asked, coming closer. "Just playing a bit." "Jake's about to lose again," I replied, trying to relieve the tension. "You never let me win," Jake complained, laughing. Emily joined us, and the atmosphere changed once again. The lightness of the conversation made me feel relieved, but doubt still lingered in my mind. I didn't know how long I could ignore the attraction that was growing between Jake and me. As the days went by, the tension grew, and I realized that my attraction to Jake was not something simple to ignore. Interactions that had previously been casual became loaded with meaning. One evening, while we were all watching a movie, my wife went to the bathroom, and Jake lay down on the sofa next to me, his arm resting against mine. The sensation of the contact shocked me. My heart raced, and for a moment I considered pulling away, but his closeness was so comforting. Emily was distracted, immersed in the movie, and I wondered if she would notice the tension between us. "Are you okay, Mike?" Jake whispered, his gaze penetrating mine. The question took me by surprise. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, and I knew I had to be honest. "I don't know, man. It's all so confusing." He nodded, understanding. "Sometimes it's hard to deal with our feelings, but you should talk to Emily about it." "I know you should. But what if it ruins everything? What if I hurt her?" My voice shook as I spoke. "Sometimes taking risks is the only way to really live, Mike." "Don't be afraid to be true to yourself," he replied, his voice calm. The movie continued, but his words kept reverberating in my mind. The idea of being true to myself frightened and intrigued me at the same time. As the night progressed, the intensity of the moment became more and more unbearable. Jake's last week at Emily's was approaching, and the sense of urgency was growing by the day. Every moment together was becoming precious and, at the same time, unbearable. I knew I had to keep everything I'd experienced with Jake to myself, without letting Emily see anything. The house was full of laughter and plans for the future. Emily was in high spirits, planning a special dinner to say goodbye to her brother. But inside, I felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. The connection with Jake was intense, and every day it seemed like a challenge not to give in to the desire burning inside me. That night, after a day full of laughing and talking, Jake and I found a moment alone on the balcony. The stars were shining in the sky and the air was cool. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken words and repressed feelings. "So, are you really leaving next week?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice betrayed my anxiety. Jake looked at me, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Yeah, it's all right. Life goes on, you know." He gave a sad smile, but he couldn't hide the frustration in his eyes. It was hard to accept that he was about to lose everything. "Will you miss it all?" I asked, gesturing towards the house and the time we spent together. "More than you know, Mike." His voice was full of emotion. "But we can't get hung up on that. We can't do this to Emily." His words hit me like a punch in the gut. The truth was that what we both had was special, but I was stuck in a marriage and a life that I didn't know made sense anymore. The pressure of hiding everything we'd lived through was making me anxious. and as Jake spoke, I realized that my emotions were running high. I don't know how to deal with this, I admitted, feeling the weight of guilt suffocate me. What we're doing isn't right, but Jake moved closer, reducing the distance between us, and I could feel the electricity in the air. But it's real. It's intense. We can't ignore what's happening between us, Mike. His closeness left me in a whirlwind of emotions. The desire was irresistible, but the fear of losing everything paralyzed me. What about Emily? I asked, anguish spreading through me. How can I do this to her? Jake took a deep breath as if he was preparing to tell me something important. You have to be honest with yourself. What do you really want? What do you feel? These questions haunted me. I wanted Jake, but I didn't know if I could be happy leaving Emily behind. The internal struggle was becoming unbearable. With each passing day, the thought of losing Jake became more painful. I want you, Jake, but you can't tell my wife anything. Do you understand? Of course, we're clear. After he confirmed it, I kissed him straight away. Emily can catch us here, are you sure? He said with fear in his eyes. Don't worry, she's gone to bed early tonight. It can just be us tonight. It was a night that had everything to be perfect, and indeed it was. We connected on the balcony. The last week has been full of silent moments, furtive glances, and accidental touches. During the day, I tried to act normally, but at night, when the house was silent and only the two of us were awake, the truth would come out. On one of these nights, while Emily was in her room, Jake approached me in the kitchen. He had just prepared a snack, but the atmosphere was far from casual. I can't leave without you knowing how I feel, he said, his voice firm but full of vulnerability. Jake, please. I started to protest, but he wouldn't let me finish. I need you to know that these days have been the best of my life. I've never felt this way about anyone before. He was so close that I could feel his warmth. His words resonated in me, creating an even deeper conflict. The thought of betraying Emily, the woman I loved, was devastating, but the connection with Jake was something I couldn't ignore. I was caught between two worlds, and what scared me most was that I could easily choose the wrong one. What if you don't choose me? What will become of me? Jake continued, the pain evident in his voice. I don't want to leave all this behind without knowing how you really feel. I looked into his eyes, and for a moment, all that existed was the two of us, the rest of the world disappearing. The desire was overwhelming, and the temptation to give in was immense. But reality came back with full force, and I slowly pulled away, trying to keep my sanity. I can't do this, Jake. I can't hurt Emily. My voice failed me, but I had to stand firm. Jake looked away, a mixture of frustration and sadness forming on his face. So that's it? You're just going to let it all go? The pain in his words was like a knife cutting through my heart. I don't know what to do, I screamed, anguish overflowing. I love Emily, but I can't ignore how I feel about you. It's all so complicated. The tension was palpable, and the battle inside me seemed endless. But last night, everything changed. Emily had left for an appointment, and Jake was home alone. The urgency of our emotions seemed to have reached a climax, and the atmosphere was charged with an undeniable electricity. Without thinking, I approached him. Our gazes met, and in an instant, everything we couldn't say was put aside. Jake pulled me close, and our lips met in a searing kiss, full of passion and pent-up desire. It was as if all the barriers we had built were crumbling. But reality hit hard, and in the heat of the moment, I knew I couldn't give myself away completely. The kiss was intense, but the thought of betraying Emily made me pull back, fear consuming me. I pulled away, panting, feeling like I was about to lose everything. No, I can't do that. The words came out as an anguished whisper. Jake was pale, confused, and hurt. So you're just going to let it all go? The pain in his voice was almost unbearable. The tension was palpable, and the battle inside me seemed endless. But last night, everything changed. Emily had left for an appointment, and Jake was home alone. The urgency of our emotions seemed to have reached a climax, and the atmosphere was charged with an undeniable electricity. Without thinking, I approached him. Our gazes met, and in an instant, everything we couldn't say was put aside. Jake pulled me close, and our lips met in a searing kiss, full of passion and pent-up desire. It was as if all the barriers we had built were crumbling. But reality hit hard, and in the heat of the moment, I knew I couldn't give myself away completely. The kiss was intense, but the thought of betraying Emily made me pull back, fear consuming me. I pulled away, panting, feeling like I was about to lose everything. No, I can't do that. The words came out as an anguished whisper. Jake was pale, confused and hurt. So you're just going to let it all go? The pain in his voice was almost unbearable. Minus, I don't know what to do. We can see each other more often. Let's talk by text, I replied, anguish crushing my heart. That night, as I tried to deal with the pressure of my emotions, I realized that I was losing not only the chance to be happy with Jake, but also the possibility of being honest with Emily. The fear of hurting her and the guilt of betraying her trust kept me trapped in an invisible prison. Jake left the next morning, and as Emily hugged him, feeling sad about her brother's departure, I looked at him, knowing that the only thing he carried with him was a secret. A love that could never be revealed. A desire that would never have a future. Will you miss him? Emily asked, turning to me. Yeah, a little. I tried to smile, but the pain was clear on my face. Jake walked away, taking a piece of me with him. The connection we had was real, but now it was locked away in my heart. A secret I would keep forever. As Emily talked about future plans, I couldn't escape the feeling that somehow I had lost not only Jake, but also a part of who I was. And so the cycle began again. Life moved on, but the memories of what we had experienced together remained fresh in my mind. It was a reality that I would have to carry in silence, hiding what could have been, while trying to be the husband that Emily deserved. Each day the sun rose and set, marking the passage of time, but the weight of longing accompanied me, like a shadow that never went away. The mornings were the hardest. When I woke up, the smell of Emily's fresh coffee would fill the air and I would smile, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. But deep inside me, there was an echo of laughter, of shared moments that seemed lost in a past I couldn't forget. Jake had become a constant reminder, an invisible thread linking me to what I could no longer have. His presence was like a perfume that settles on clothes. Even after so long, I could still smell him. The love I felt for Jake was still hidden in an obscure part of my soul, eternally guarded, a flame that could never be extinguished. On the quietest nights, when the house became a haven of solitude, I allowed myself to remember. The conversations we had, the looks we exchanged, every touch that seemed to electrify the skin. It was a burning fire, and I fought the temptation to let myself be carried away by it. Emily, on the other hand, was an incredible woman. Her strength and kindness were undeniable. She deserved everything, and I wanted to be the man who would make her happy. But there was an emptiness inside me, a gap that no amount of effort could fill. I strove to be the ideal husband, but the memories of Jake were like a forbidden secret, whispering in my mind when I least expected it. One particularly beautiful day, as we walked through the park, I saw a couple embracing, and a squeeze in my heart made me hesitate. The sun was shining, the flowers were in full bloom, but all I could think about was Jake. I wanted to be able to share these moments with him, to laugh and run together under that blue sky. What was a simple walk for Emily was an internal battlefield for me. Meetings with friends were another trap. Relaxed conversations and laughter masked the pain I was carrying. I laughed, but deep down my heart yearned for something that was out of reach. Jake had the power to make me feel alive, as if the world had color and flavor. Now everything seemed faded. One night when I was at home, Emily fell asleep next to me and silence took over. With a heavy heart, I got up and went out onto the balcony. The gentle breeze caressed my face and the stars twinkled in the sky. It was there that I remembered how Jake used to look up at the stars, telling stories and making plans that we could never fulfill. The thought enveloped me like a tight hug, and the longing almost made me cry. Life goes on, but I knew that some things are never forgotten. My love for Jake was like a secret kept in a safe, and even though I tried to hide it, it was still there, pulsating in my chest. As the days went by, I wondered if one day I could really leave it behind. Every moment I spent with Emily was a reminder of what I was no longer, and that left me conflicted. I wanted to be the man she needed, but how could I be complete when part of me still belonged to Jake? And so I went on, living between two worlds. One where I was the devoted husband, trying to make Emily happy, and the other where the passion for Jake burned in a dark corner of my soul. Every laugh, every happy moment I shared with Emily came with a price. The reminder that somewhere true love still burned, even if in silence. I just hoped that one day that love would find the peace it so desperately needed. Hello, my loves. What did you think of this story? I really want to know what you think, so leave me your comments. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a super like and subscribe to the channel. Activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our daily videos. See you tomorrow, and a special goodbye to you.